Good morning guys, Mac here again. Been a little bit quiet lately, I've had the day job to do, but I've got some more tech here that I thought would be worth having a look at. Now it is stuff I wouldn't normally cover, mainly because a lot of people would consider it not very interesting, but I think these devices are way more than a sum of their parts, so I think they'd be worth having a look at. So let's have a look at what I'm talking about. So what have we got here? This is a Synology DS918 NAS, or network attached storage device. Like I say, storage is not particularly interesting, but these NAS devices, they are so capable. They can do so much more than I think a lot of people give them credit for. So this is quite a decent spec unit. It's probably kind of very high-end consumer, kind of low-end business unit. I mean, that's what I use them for. I've got a couple in the office that I use constantly. So without the hard disk in, these things are surprisingly light. This is a 4-bay unit. It's got a USB 3 port at the back. It's got USB 3 at the rear as well, and also two 1 gig Ethernet ports on the back. Very good units. Now this is an Intel based unit, which basically means we can also run some virtualization on this as well, which I think is one of the other things that makes this interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this built up, and I'm going to show you why it's a bit more than just storage. So I have four 8TB Iron Wolf drives that I'm going to fit to this, so that gives me 32 terabytes of raw storage, and it will give me about 24 terabyte storage after you take into account some of the redundancy that the unit will build in. Fitting the hard disk in these is very easy, by the way. You don't need any tools or anything. There's some little bars that pop off the cages, and they hold the hard drives in place. So what I'm going to do is just pop the hard drive in and pop these bars on, and it holds the drive into the tray. There we go, that was incredibly easy. You also get these little keys to lock them in place if you want. I never bother with those. And for this unit as well, and I should have fitted this before I fitted the drives, I've also got a memory upgrade. And the reason I put an 8 gig RAM upgrade in there is because I'm going to run a virtual machine on this as well. So let's go and have a look at why I think these units are so good. Getting these units set up couldn't be easier. I've put it on the network, I've just plugged it straight into my switch, and I've left it for 3 or 4 minutes just to boot up. It does take a little while because it's got its own operating system. What I'm going to do to set it up is just pop into my web browser. There's a website called find.synology.com. We're going to go to that website, and it's going to search for the NAS on my network. There we go. Now that's actually one of my office units, so I'm not going to connect to that one, but if I step through it, we should be able to see my other ones. That's a router that I've got. And there we go. We've got a brand new disk station. You'll see that it's a DS918. It's got an IP address and everything like that, and you'll see that it's not installed. So we're going to set it up, and the way we do it, we just hit click connect. I'm going to read all the license agreement. There you go, obviously. I'm going to let it go through the setup process. So we're going to click setup. I want to install the latest operating system or disk station manager for it, so we're going to say install now. This can take a few minutes, so we'll let this run. There we go. That took a little while, but I'm going to go through this bit. We need to give it a server name. Now I'm going to give it a test setup, so I'm just going to call it Office Backups, because that's what this one's going to be. I'm going to set up my username on here, and I'm going to give it a password. There we go. Now, Quick Connect's quite interesting because you can connect to this over the internet as well, and the Quick Connect service will do that for you, but I'm not going to do that for this unit. And here we are. We're in the disk station operating system. Now, what I'm going to do is, if you have a look up here, you'll see all the options that you have available to you. Now, it really is quite a feature-rich operating system, rather than it just being some disks that appear on your network. So, for example, let's have a look at the storage manager here. The first thing I'm going to do is create a volume. So the volume is the thing that enables us to store information on the device. But if we have a look quickly in here, you'll see that we've got our 4 hard disks in here. So what I'm going to do is pop in the volume. I'm going to hit create because there's no volumes there at the moment. I'm going to include all of the drives in the volume. It's going to warn me that they're going to be erased. Obviously that's true because we're going to be creating a new volume. And I'm going to stay with the defaults, which is BTRFS. There we go. So let's click apply. You'll see there that we've got, out of all those drives, we've got 21.8 terabytes available. So that's going to take some time to run. You can see that it's running a consistency check on the volume just to make sure the drives are okay. Now, that's going to take several hours to run on this unit. But what I'll do is I'll take you through some of the items on the devices that I already have, just to show you why I think these devices are so very good. The most common use of these devices, of course, is just to provide a big bunch of storage on your network so that you can access it from any device. Now, that's how this one's configured at the moment. I've got a couple of shares set up, which I'll show you. If we pop into the file station here, you'll see I've got a couple of shares, one called Rock Tenancy, one called WL Tenancy, and they are basically just shares that I've set up because I'm backing up some Office 365 tenancies at the moment. Now, of course, you can define multiple shares if you want, and I'll show you how you do that. We're going to pop into the control panel. You'll see, much like most other operating systems, you've got a whole set of things here that we can look at. Now, what I'm going to do is actually just define a new share. So I'm going to pop into here, I'm going to create a new share, and I'm going to call it test share. Now, I won't take you through all of these things, but you do have various options around encrypting the volumes as well, which I think is quite unusual. I tend to encrypt everything. Why wouldn't you? You can also, for example, set quotas. So, for example, if I only wanted a maximum of 5 terabytes to be used on this volume, I can do that here. So when you look at this in Finder or in Microsoft Explorer, it will show you as a 5 terabyte volume. So I'm going to click apply. That'll take a moment to create. And now I have multiple users set up on this, so I can decide who has access to that volume and to what level of access. I can give them no access, I can give them read only, I can even set some custom stuff up as well. I'm just going to leave it at default and we're going to let it create. Now that at the basic level is what a lot of people use these devices for. So what does it look like? Well, let's open it on my Mac. We'll have a look here. I'll pop down to my network. There we go. It's Office backups. And you can see those shares that we've set up. So if we wanted to access a test share, for example, we absolutely could. There it is. There's nothing on there at the moment. If we wanted to copy some files to it, we absolutely can. And of course, they will now work from anywhere on the network. And it's all based on the fact that I'm already logged in as me. Now, in terms of performance, on gigabit Ethernet, you'll generally get about 100, 110 megabytes per second, or to give a more pragmatic view, it takes you about 10 seconds to copy a gigabyte of data to or from the device. Now, you can get them faster than that. I'm about to upgrade mine to 10 gig, for example, because I move a lot of data around and that is important to me. But at a very basic level, that's what you do with these. There are some other cool things. So for example, you Mac users, you can support Time Machine on these devices. I'm going to pop into the Advanced tab here. And what you'll see is there an option down here for enable bonjour Time Machine broadcast via SMB. You really want it via SMB rather than AFP, but you can actually use this unit for Time Machine. Now you have to select which volume you want to use. So I'm going to say the test share there, for example. And what I will be able to do now is use that volume for Time Machine. It looks like we also have to restart the unit. So let's let it do that and we'll come back to it. So that's our basic storage. How do we set up volumes? How do we access them on the network? What makes these units so cool? Well, it's all the additional capabilities and they're all driven by this thing here, the package center. So if you pop into that, you will see that there are so many options of additional packages that you can install on these units. So on this one, for example, you'll see that I've got exFAT access, which allows me to plug in drives that have been formatted with exFAT. I've got active backup for Office 365, which is a fantastic little package that will enable you to back up Office 365 tenancies. It does your email, OneDrive, your SharePoint sites, all kinds of stuff. It's all kind of good. Now, in terms of additional packages, let's have a pop in here. You can see there is a whole range of them. And this is where the strength of these units really starts to come into their own. You can add all kinds of things. Now on this unit, I don't actually have that much installed. So let's jump across to one that I use all the time. And I will show you what it looks like in terms of actually building a more capable unit. This is one of my live Office units. Now this has a lot more stuff going on it. Now, of course, it does have your basic shares set up because, you know, it is a storage device. So I've got tons of stuff set up for cloud. So for example, it syncs down some OneDrive stuff. It syncs down my Dropbox content. It also has some other shares like a general storage area. It's also got my Time Machine for my Apple gear. some stuff for backups, and so also some volumes that I share content with externally. So it is just one big storage device, but where this device comes into its own is the fact that I have many other packages installed. So let's have a look and see what else I have installed on this unit. So on this particular one, I have Cloud Sync. Now what that does is enable me to synchronize with things like Dropbox, with OneDrive, and all kinds of other services. It even supports things like Gmail and all kinds of services in there. Active Backup, well, that enables me to back up Office 365 tenancies. Hyper Backup is a backup utility that enables me to back up this NAS to another NAS, or to another NAS that's in a different location, which is what I use this for. This one here is particularly interesting. Virtual Machine Manager. It gives me the ability to run virtual machines, which I'll talk about a bit more in a second. There's also things like DNS servers. So this runs a DNS server for some of my lab areas. There's also some snapshot stuff going on. Well, what it will do is it periodically replicate certain shares to another NAS that I have in the network. One that's quite common and people are quite into is this idea that it will also run your Plex server for media. So as you can see, I do quite a lot with this unit. Now, virtual machines are quite interesting, so let's have a look at that. Now, the first thing I will say is don't expect amazing performance from this as a virtual machine host. To give you an idea, I have a single virtual machine defined on here, and all it's running is a Windows domain controller, DNS, and a basic web server for some basic services that I use in my lab. Now, that server itself, even though it's got 4 cores and 8 gig of RAM allocated to it, it's not the world's fastest machine. So let me show you if I log into it here. It's this one, and it will take us in. Just while that's running, oh, in fact, it's running some updates now, because of course it is. To give you an idea, for example, if we look at the Geekbench scores for that machine, which I ran earlier, if I open, I think it's that one, there you go. Let's look at this score here. So you can see it's single score 1347, it's multi-core at 3640. In terms of performance, the virtual machine hosts on this, they're not going to set the performance world on fire, but for basic functional devices, I think it's fantastic. That machine there, it's been running forever, and it just works and never causes me any issues. Now you can see it's running there. It happens to be doing some updates, which is of course no surprise to anyone. But the thing that surprises me is the capability of the virtual machine manager. So for example, if we look at protection, I think it is, you'll see, for example, that virtual machine has a protection schedule against it. And basically what it will do, it will take snapshots at defined periods. So if I need to roll that machine back, I absolutely can. There's also further capabilities on these. You can either cluster them as well with other Synology NAS units as well, which I think's pretty amazing. You do need licensing above the version that comes with the Synology for that, but in terms of basic capabilities, these devices are absolutely astonishingly capable. In terms of networking, there are some other things you may find interesting. So even though this is a gigabit-based unit, there are things that we can do with the networking to augment that performance. So for example, we'll see on mine, I have something called link aggregation set up. So what I have is 2 gigabit connections actually load balance. Now it won't give me higher throughput than 1 gig because that's not how link aggregation works, but what it means is I can have multiple devices delivering or taking data off this device before it actually starts to slow down. Now I won't get in too much into link aggregation because it's a topic in its own right, and perhaps I'll do something about that in a later video, but if you do load these devices quite a lot, link aggregation can be quite useful. You can also define things like power schedules. So for example, if we pop into hardware and power, so we could set a power schedule if you wish. So my backup unit, for example, that takes a replica of these units, well, it's only on for a couple of hours every night. I don't need to run that 24/7. Whereas this is one of my units that's on all the time. You'll also see, for example, this one's connected to a UPS. It will also share that UPS information with other NAS units if I want. I can even do things like schedule tasks to run automatically. So for example, you can see that I've got some backup routines that run automatically. I've got some drive tests that run. You can even connect and share out external devices. What about things like notifications? Well, I can set up email notifications. So for example, I get email alerts if any drives fail or if the backup system doesn't work, all that kind of good stuff. So as you can see, they are very powerful and very capable units. And this is what I was getting to about them being far more capable than just a straightforward storage device. Now, I haven't meant this to be a full review. Really what I just wanted to tackle was a couple of questions that I was asked by my friends, which is why do I use these devices so much? And I hope I've tried to answer that a little bit for you. Now, if you get any specific questions about the Synology units that I use or how I use them, drop a comment down below and I'll try and answer them for you.